Earlier we looked at the 6 ego states one by one. We saw how the 6 minds CP, NP, A, FC, AC, and SC move inside one person. However, the most basic structure of transactional analysis is originally explained in 3 branches. That is PAC, parent. P is the self that was parented, adult. A is the thinking self, child. C is the feeling self. These 3 frames help us understand the 6 ego states through a slightly larger structure. This means that inside me, there is a way I learned from my parents, emotions that have continued from childhood, and a function that tunes the two and makes judgments. Now, let's look at these 3 one by one. First, let's look at the self that was parented, parent. When we bring together CP, the strict parent-like mind, and NP, the caring parent-like mind, we can call this parent, the parent-like mind. Many parents say things like this to their children. Do this. Do not do that. A person should naturally do that. But children often follow their parents' actions more deeply than their parents' words. Let's think again of the young daughter who scolds her father by saying, "Dad, you drank again, didn't you?" The child is not saying this because she knows some great theory. It is probably closer to having learned the speech pattern and attitude of an adult she saw at home, the way someone scolded her father. In this way, the appearance that enters and settles inside me as I watch and learn from adults is parent. Parent is like the recorded voice of my parents inside me. Speech patterns, facial expressions, values, and response styles that I saw and heard in countless moments are stored inside me and then come out at some moment. During middle school and high school, there was a friend's house I often visited. That friend's mother always took good care of guests. Even when my friend was not home, she told me to go into the room and wait. And she would set a meal for me. She was someone who gave a lot. Time passed, and that friend became an adult and ran a butcher shop. Once, when I was greeting him and about to leave, he packed a large amount of meat and threw it into my car. Even though I said it was all right, he would not stop. At that moment, I remembered my school days. The way of his mother had already settled inside him. The voice of parent has 2 textures. One is the firm rule that says, this is how it should be done. That is CP. The other is the warm care that asks, are you all right? That is NP. So when I push someone firmly, my inner CP may have come out. When I care for someone excessively, my inner NP may have come out. At that moment, I can ask myself, whose appearance am I following right now? Is this response really needed by this person right now? This question matters because parent is familiar and automatic. I may think I chose it, but in fact, a way I saw long ago may simply have come out. Second, let's look at the feeling self. Child. Child is the feeling self that has continued from childhood. The roots of emotions such as joy, fear, hurt feelings, unfairness, excitement, and shrinking are inside it. Someone is deeply hurt right now, or someone watches others carefully because they are afraid of being scolded, or someone is excited, laughing and talking, or someone wants to go their own way again, even after being held back. At that moment, there is not only the present emotion inside that person, an emotional pattern that has continued from childhood becomes alive together. So child is not a simple storage place of instinct. It is the root of the mind that experiences emotion, remembers emotion, and brings emotion out again. This feeling self can be seen again in 3 branches. FC is the power to show emotion directly. It is free child. A C is the power to hold emotion in and adjust. It is adapted child. SC is the power to turn wounds and resistance into one's own narrative. It is special child. The larger frame that contains these 3 ego states together is child. So we should not see child only as immature emotion. Inside it, there is the power to burst emotion out the power to press emotion down and adjust, and the power to turn wounds into a new direction for one's life. A helpful scene for understanding this structure appears in the film Good Will Hunting. Will has lived with a deep wound from childhood. The therapist Sean repeats these words to him. It is not your fault. It is not your fault. It is not your fault. At first, Will says blankly, I know. But as Sean continues to say it, Will eventually breaks down, holds Sean, and sobs. Inside this scene, the three appearances of child can be seen together. In the first appearance, where Will endures blankly and says, I know, there is AC, which tries not to show the wound. It is the mind that has suppressed emotion because it was afraid of being scolded or looking weak. Then, in the tears that finally burst out, there is FC, where suppressed emotion pours out. The pain that had been blocked for a long time finally flows outward. And afterward, in the moment when Will gains the power to move toward a new life, there is SC, which turns the wound into a new narrative for his life. This scene shows how complex child is. Child is not simply immature emotion. It can be suppressed, it can burst out, and it can help a person rise again. So child is the emotional root of the human being. Change, recovery, and conflict inside us often begin from this feeling self. Third, let's look at the thinking self, adult. Now we are looking at the function that finds the present direction between parent and child. That is adult. It is said that the world-famous dancer Isadora Duncan once said this to the playwright Bernard Shaw. If you and I were to marry a wonderful child with my appearance and your mind would be born. Then Bernard Shaw is said to have replied, how unfortunate it would be if a child were born with my appearance and your mind. This answer may look somewhat cold. But one thing is clear. Bernard Shaw is not immediately swept away by emotion or fantasy. He is logically examining the possibility. The mind that works at a moment like this is adult. Inside us, there is already the voice of parent learned from parents. And there are the emotions of child that have continued from childhood. The problem is that these two do not always cooperate well. At times, the parent-like rules are too strong. At other times, emotion shakes too greatly. When these two collide, conflict appears. What is needed at that moment is adult. Adult is the mind that listens to the rules of the past and the emotions of the present together and judges what is most fitting here and now. So adult is close to an inner pilot. This pilot looks at two instrument panels. Together, one is the parent instrument panel, which shows the rules and beliefs of the past. The other is the child instrument panel, which shows the emotions and desires of the present. And it asks these questions. So what is the best choice now? Is this emotion a fact or a reaction? Should I say this now or later? When this function is alive, a person can pause and take a breath instead of becoming angry immediately. They can compare the strengths and weaknesses of the choices. They can also think about how one word said now may affect things 10 minutes later or 1 year later. That is why adult is especially important in important relationships. Whether in a family, a gathering, or an organization, direction needs to be set well when the relationship first begins to move. At first, a small adjustment may be enough. But once the relationship goes seriously off track, it takes much greater strength to bring it back. Adult is not simply the function of being smart. It is the present judgment function that listens to the many voices inside me and holds the steering control according to the situation. At a moment like this, we can ask ourselves these questions. Is this thought a rule from the past? Is this reaction the emotion of now? Or is this a judgment based on the facts of now? When we can ask these questions, adult begins its role as a tuner inside us. In Freud's psychoanalysis, the human mind was explained as superego, ego, and id. Perhaps because Erich Berner, the founder of transactional analysis, also received psychoanalytic training, the two theories can look somewhat similar from the outside. Eric Berne explained the mind through the structure of parent, adult, and child. When placed this way, parent may seem to correspond to superego, adult to ego, and child to id to some extent. But they are not completely the same. Id is closer to instinct and impulse itself. In contrast, child is not simple impulse. It is the feeling self in which childhood emotions, responses, memories, wounds, and joy are still alive and moving now. Also, parent is not simply a command structure. It is the result of the speech patterns and attitudes of adults and the ways of care and rules that I actually saw and heard settling inside me. An adult does not remain only as an abstract mediating device. It appears in observable forms in life, such as speech patterns, facial expressions, posture, and responses. The PAC of transactional analysis does not stop at explaining a theoretical structure inside the mind. It is closer to reading how a person actually responds in life and relationships. In other words, PAC is the basic map that sees the mind broadly, and CP, NP, A, FC, AC, and SC can be called an expanded map that helps us read that map in more detail.